What's up, guys? My name's Brandon, and welcome back to Apple Weekly. In this episode, we're going to discuss iOS 17 and why Apple is probably going to add something to it next week, why the iPhone is getting banned in China, iOS 18 rumors, a crazy AirTag story, and much more. And as always, if you want to stay as up to date as possible in the world of Apple, hit that subscribe button down below so you don't miss any future episodes, and also so you don't miss out on my live stream of Apple's Wonderlust event on Tuesday. All right, so let's start off with iOS 17 and why Apple is going to add something to the software next week. So as expected, this week we did not see any new iOS 17 betas get released. That's exactly what we predicted the week prior. However, we did get a surprise iOS release this week, and that was for iOS 16 in the form of a 16.6.1. And this was unexpected because there were no signs of a 16.6.1 being worked on internally. So that tells us, the Apple rushed to push out this update. Now, why would Apple rush to push out an update? Well, we have an answer, and it was in the security notes of 16.6.1. And you can see further details about this in a Citizen Lab report here. So it says this was called the BlastPass exploit chain. So it says the exploit involved passkit attachments containing malicious images sent from an attacker iMessage account to the victim. And again, these zero-click exploits are the most dangerous and the most, destructive out there, because if somebody sends you this message, there's nothing you can do. Like, you're infected. You don't have to click on it or anything. You don't even have to open the message. You're infected. So that is exactly why Apple rushed to push out a 16.6.1 to patch this exploit. And again, this exploit was working all the way up until Apple released 16.6.1. So that means that this exploit, in theory, should work on the latest iOS 17 beta as well. You are still vulnerable to this exploit. So you better believe that Apple is most likely going to add a fix to patch up these exploits, to patch up these bugs in the next version of iOS 17, whether that be another beta, whether that be the RC, whatever it is. I'm sure Apple is looking to address this. But anyways, taking a look at iOS 17 beta 8, not really noticing any difference from beta 7 as I talked about in my What's New video. I've looked around the software. I have a beta 7 and a beta 8 device. I compared the two, did not see anything new. So I haven't seen anything new there. However, I will say performance does seem better. And I hate saying that. I always hate saying that going from beta to beta, but it actually feels a little bit better. I'm actually going to run a fresh Geekbench test here just to see what we score and kind of compare it to the previous run. All right, so we scored a 2636 on the single core and a 6757 on the multi-core. So you can see the multi-core score is higher than the last run that we did, but the single core is a little bit down. But nonetheless, performance has felt great for me so far on this beta. Now, when it comes to the battery life, not really the same can be said. So I'm gonna grab my main device over here and take a look at my battery usage. And honestly, it's been about the same as the previous beta to me, if not even a little bit worse. So battery life has not been super impressive to me lately. And I know it kind of comes and goes. It obviously depends on how you use your device as well. And I have been using my device a lot more this week than the previous week. So maybe that plays a role. But you can see here, 7 hours and 17 minutes of screen active time. That was my average over the last 10 days. 3 hours and 10 of idle time. And you can see my usage there pretty much over 100% every single day, except for last Thursday. And the last 24 hours here, you can see I let my phone get down to low battery, which is never good, but I did let it get there. A lot of YouTube watching today while I'm eating and things like that. But yeah, battery life, not the greatest. Hopefully we see an improvement with the RC, but at this point, I'm not counting on it. We'll probably start seeing battery improvements again around like the 17.2, 17.3 area. That's usually what we see with these big iOS releases. All right, so now let's move on to what to expect next from Apple, because prepare yourselves. We're about to enter the two biggest weeks of the year. So next week is going to be the week of September 11th, and Apple is hosting their Wonderlust event on Tuesday, September 12th. Now, the event starts at 1 p.m. Eastern time, but I will start live streaming here on YouTube at around 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. I don't want to say right on the dot because sometimes I'm a little bit late there, but 11 o'clock on Tuesday the 12th, it's always a fun time. Make sure you are there, at least come chat for a little bit. So I'm not expecting anything to be released on Monday, but I would expect to see the RC version of iOS 17, iPadOS 17, and all the rest right there on the 12th after Apple's event. Now, the big question mark this year here is macOS Sonoma, because at this point we are on an A build, so it is possible to see a macOS Sonoma at some point in September, which is a rarity. Apple usually releases macOS in October, and I don't believe they've ever released macOS in the same week as iOS. So that would be, potentially a first of its kind if we do see macOS RC release next week and then the final the following week, but we'll have to wait and see on that. But anyway, yeah, so the 12th is the event, and then the following week, the week of the 18th, is when we should see iOS 17 get released to the general public. The official launch should be on September 18th. Now, again, we could have a release technically anywhere up to the 21st of September, because if the iPhones come out on the 22nd and those are running iOS 17, of course, we need an iOS 17 to be out to the public by then. But usually Apple sticks to those Monday releases when it comes to their official software updates. And then also on that week of the 18th, I would expect to see the first beta of iOS 17.1. So 17.1 beta 1 should be out probably, potentially the same day. Most likely though, it's going to be the next day on Tuesday, the 19th. And that could include the journal application and some other things that we are not getting in 17.0. Okay, so now I want to talk about some more iOS related news before the main news segment of this episode. And the first thing I want to discuss is that Apple invited developers to Cupertino this week for an all-day workshop on app optimization with a focus on performance and battery life. So this is interesting. I believe this is a first of its kind where it's specifically pointing out performance and battery life. So hopefully that's going to be a big focus for iOS 18. Now, speaking of iOS 18, this next software version could be the reincarnation of Siri. It could be Siri 2.0. And that's because Apple is allegedly spending millions of dollars per day on conversational AI. And according to the information, Apple plans to use language models to make Siri smarter and help users automate complex multi-step tasks with voice-based commands. For example, Siri might be able to do what we used to rely on a shortcut to do. Maybe it can take 5 images, convert them into a GIF, and send it to a friend via iMessage, all in one action, all voice activated. And the benefit of this would be, of course, that you don't have to set up a shortcut manually. Like, to do that in the Shortcuts application, yes, you can automate it, but you have to set it up manually to begin with. So having this built into Siri, so you don't even need to manually set anything up to begin with, would be awesome. And given the fact that generative AI has become so massive and Apple has mentioned it multiple times, leads me to believe that Siri is definitely going to be getting some type of big improvement next year. Now, we also have some news regarding the EU, and I know everybody hates the EU when it comes to their laws against Apple, but according to Bloomberg, Apple's App Store, the Safari browser, and the iOS operating system as a whole have just been formally designated as gatekeepers in the European Union. So the EU's Digital Markets Act, the DMA, is trying to diminish the dominance of major tech companies by introducing regulations for gatekeeper platforms. These platforms are being prohibited from prioritizing their services over competitors, combining personal data across services, and restricting users from downloading apps from other platforms. And it's not just Apple either. So this commission has mentioned 22 services, including offerings from Google, Amazon, and TikTok as gatekeepers. And they mention that violators of the DMA regulations face significant fines, potentially accounting to 10% of their global revenue, with higher penalties for recurrent breaches. And I can't do 2 negative stories in a row, so I need to mention that Procreate just came out with a new application recently called Procreate Dreams. And this is a really cool application that brings intuitive animation creation to the iPad. So if you're into animation, if you used Procreate before, definitely check this application out. It looks pretty awesome. I wish I was talented enough to be good at that. All right, so now let's move on to the latest Apple news. And first off, right off the bat, I'm not going to talk about iPhone 15 or the upcoming Apple event. I will have a separate video coming to talk specifically about those topics. Instead, let's talk about the fact that China is banning the iPhone. Yes, really. They are banning government officials, multiple state agencies, and state companies from using iPhones. According to Bloomberg, several agencies have begun instructing staff not to bring their iPhones to work. And in addition, Beijing intends to extend that restriction far more broadly to a plethora of state-owned enterprises and other government-controlled organizations. So this is not good news at all for Apple just days before introducing their iPhone 15, because the China market is extremely important for Apple and the iPhone. It takes up a big chunk of their revenue. So you better believe, this is a big hit. And if you take a look at this viral clip that I saw on X, it's pretty interesting. I mean, look at how everybody is packed into the Huawei store and nobody is at the Apple store. That is like a fever dream. That doesn't even seem real. That looks like a Black Mirror episode. And someone on Mac Rumors made a really good comment on this. They said, Apple should run a TV ad promoting this as a selling point. The iPhone is so secure that the Chinese government doesn't allow their employees to bring one to work. Security, that's iPhone. Anyways, let's move on to some more positive news. So Apple might be working on a cheaper laptop. It's Apple. I know. It's Apple and cheaper doesn't go together, but let's hear this out. This report comes from DigiTimes and their industry sources, who say that Apple could be launching a new low-cost MacBook series to compete with the Chromebook models in the education sector. And they're saying that this could come as soon as mid-2024. They say that the outer appearance will still use a metal casing, but it will be made of different materials, and the cost of the mechanical components will be lower. And while I do think that this is something that Apple is considering, I highly doubt that it's going to come by mid next year. We would have heard a lot more rumors about this, but still, it's cool to hear that Apple is working on a cheaper laptop. But again, we're talking about Apple here. Apple and cheaper don't go together. So what is Apple's version of the Chromebook? Is it $600? Is it $700? I just can't see them ever selling a MacBook for under like $500. I think 500 would be like an impossibly low number for Apple to go on a MacBook. So I don't know, we'll see. However, a product that does have a high likelihood of coming in mid-2024 is the next iPad Pro. And I'll tell you what, this thing is shaping up to be a monster, because according to Mark Gurman, we're going to have an 11-inch and a 13-inch size. We're going to have OLED displays, the M3 chip, and a new Magic Keyboard with a larger trackpad, and it'll be made of aluminum. And now, according to a couple of new reports, we could possibly see a mid-2024 launch, this according to DigiTimes, and then according to another rumor in Korea, Apple might be offering a 4 terabyte storage option for this iPad Pro. And around that same time frame, maybe a little bit before, we could see new M3 MacBooks, and that's because Ming-Chi Kuo just came out and said that M3 MacBooks are now not expected for 2023. Now keep in mind, he does say MacBooks specifically in this post. He does not mention the iMac, so we could still see a potential launch of M3 later this year, maybe in October. We could see the M3 iMac, but MacBooks look to be ruled out until next year. I would imagine they'll probably come in the spring. And then finally, let's talk about another crazy AirTag story that happened this past week. And this one is about a man who sold cars, then stole them back, but was met with a surprise when an AirTag was in one of those cars. So this all starts on Facebook Marketplace, where a Minnesota man found a truck that he was interested in and said it seemed like a really good deal. Which, by the way, pro tip, and this may be a hot take, but don't buy a car from Facebook Marketplace. Just please don't. Go on Car Gurus, go on Auto Trader, go somewhere like that. Don't buy a car on Facebook Marketplace. Anyway, when he met up with the seller, aka the thief, in a parking lot to check out the car, he noticed some red flags. Shocker. He noticed that the seller only gave him one fresh cut key, the title paper didn't seem original, and the VIN number didn't show up. And then out of nowhere, the wife of the man that was interested in the vehicle got the infamous alert that an unknown AirTag was nearby. And he said that's when, quote, everything clicked in my brain and it started making sense. So the man then called the police and turned everything over, and the thief, who is just 20 years old, was caught by police soon after. He was suspected of selling his own car and friends' cars, then stealing them back, and once arrested, he confessed to 7 cases in Minnesota and 2 more in Illinois. He's set to be back in court later this month. So you gotta love the infamous unknown AirTag nearby alert. And the fact that that's now on Android as well is a big win for the AirTag, and it's gonna save a lot of people in the future. But again, moral of the story here is just listen to your gut. This guy knew something was up, just listen to your gut. If you're ever out there with any situation and your gut's telling you one thing, never go against it, because it's always right. That's one thing I've learned a lot in my 30 years on this earth. But anyways, I'm going off subject. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode of Apple Weekly. I'm really excited for next next week. I hope you guys are as well. I've been really busy in the background working on all my videos for iOS 17 and all of that. So if you want to check out the Magma wallpapers, which I just launched last week, you can check those out in the link down in the description below. And if you enjoyed this video, I'd appreciate if you give it a thumbs up. Also, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the plethora of content coming over the next couple of weeks. But anyways, guys, thanks again for watching, and I'll see you soon.